What if the world around you isn't just something to be seen, but something to be read? Every face, every symbol, every dream carrying hidden meanings that speak directly to your unconscious mind. Beneath the surface of our daily lives lies a rich, symbolic language that most of us have forgotten how to understand. But Carl Jung didn't forget. He taught us that the mind is not just a tool for logic or survival. It's a vast inner cosmos filled with archetypes, shadows, and ancient patterns passed down through humanity itself. In this video, we're going to journey into that symbolic mind, the one Jung spent his life mapping. You'll learn how your behaviors, dreams, fears, and even the roles you play each day are shaped by invisible forces inside you. This isn't philosophy for the sake of theory. It's a mirror for your soul, a way to finally make sense of who you are and why you're here. We often believe that we understand the world through facts, logic, and what we can observe with our five senses. But Carl Jung challenged this idea. He believed that beneath everything we see, hear, and touch, there's a deeper layer, one that speaks to us in symbols, emotions, and unconscious patterns. To Jung, the world was not just a physical place, it was a mirror reflecting our inner psychological landscape. What we see out there is deeply connected to what's happening in here. And the key to truly understanding life, according to Jung, lies not in analyzing the surface, but in learning how to read the symbols beneath it. From early in his life, Jung noticed that people often acted in ways they couldn't fully explain. They'd say one thing and do another. They'd dream strange dreams that made no logical sense, yet felt deeply meaningful. This mystery fascinated him. He began to ask, why do humans behave the way they do? What are we really looking for in life? And why do we feel drawn to certain ideas, images, or stories, even when we don't fully understand them? This curiosity led Jung to explore the unconscious, the part of the mind that operates below our awareness. He believed that much of human behavior is shaped by hidden forces we don't always recognize. But he didn't see the unconscious as just a dark basement of repressed thoughts. He saw it as a rich, creative realm filled with symbols, archetypes, and messages trying to guide us toward wholeness. In this way, the world itself becomes a kind of dream, filled with signs that can help us better understand who we are. One of Jung's most important insights was that humans don't just live in the outer world. We also live in a world of meaning. A tree isn't just a tree. It might symbolize life, growth, or rootedness. A snake isn't just a reptile. It can represent danger, transformation, or temptation. Everything around us has the potential to carry symbolic meaning, and these meanings often come from deep within our unconscious mind. The more we learn to read these symbols, the more we understand ourselves. Jung noticed that ancient myths, religious stories, and even fairy tales were full of symbolic messages. These stories, though created in different times and cultures, often shared common themes and characters. Why? Because they reflect something universal about the human experience. Jung called this the collective unconscious, a shared mental blueprint that all humans carry. This is why people from different parts of the world can understand and feel moved by the same kinds of stories, dreams, or images. They speak a symbolic language that goes deeper than words. But in today's modern world, we often ignore this symbolic language. We're taught to value logic over feeling, facts over imagination, and science over myth. Jung believed that this one-sided way of seeing the world leaves us disconnected from ourselves. When we ignore the symbolic side of life, we lose touch with what truly gives it meaning. We might feel empty, restless, or lost without knowing why. Jung saw this as a kind of spiritual crisis, and he believed that reconnecting with the symbolic world was the path to healing. So, what does it mean to read the world differently, as Jung suggested? It means looking at events not just for what they are, but for what they represent. It means listening to our dreams and noticing what symbols appear again and again. It means paying attention to the stories we're drawn to, the emotions we avoid, and the images that stir something deep inside us. It means becoming curious about the parts of ourselves we don't yet understand. Jung didn't offer easy answers. Instead, he invited us into a lifelong journey of discovery, a journey where meaning isn't handed to us, but revealed through reflection, imagination, and a willingness to explore our inner world. The more we understand the symbolic language of the psyche, the more alive and connected we become. In a world that often feels chaotic and overwhelming, Jung's message is both timeless and urgent. The key to understanding the world lies within us, and the more we open our symbolic mind, the more clearly we begin to see. Carl Jung believed that the mind doesn't just think in words, it thinks in symbols. These symbols aren't random or decorative. They are essential to how we understand our experiences, emotions, and even the world around us. For Jung, the symbolic mind was the key to bridging the gap between our conscious lives, what we know and say, and our unconscious lives, what we feel, imagine, and don't always understand. To grasp what Jung meant by the symbolic mind, imagine waking up from a dream. Maybe you saw a river, a house, or a stranger in a mask. You might think, that was strange, and go about your day. But to Jung, that dream wasn't meaningless. Each image was a symbol coming from your unconscious, trying to communicate something important. The river might represent the flow of your emotions. The house could symbolize your mind or body. The masked stranger might point to a part of yourself that you don't yet know. The symbolic mind takes these images seriously, not as facts but as metaphors for inner truth. Jung saw the symbolic mind as nature's way of helping us process life beyond logic. When something painful, mysterious, or overwhelming happens, our symbolic mind steps in and gives it a shape, a dream, an image, a story. This allows us to hold the experience, understand it emotionally, and move toward healing. Think of ancient myths, religious rituals, or even fairy tales. People across cultures created symbols, dragons, gods, magical journeys, not because they believed them literally, but because they reflected deep psychological truths. They gave life meaning. Jung also argued that modern people are starved of this kind of meaning. In a world obsessed with facts, data, and surface appearances, we often dismiss symbols as childish or outdated. But Jung warned that when we ignore our symbolic nature, we risk becoming fragmented and emotionally lost. Without symbols to help us understand life's mysteries, love, death, fear, transformation, we struggle to cope. We feel disconnected from ourselves, others, and the world. That's why Jung believed the symbolic mind isn't a luxury, it's a survival tool. One of Jung's most powerful examples of the symbolic mind is the concept of individuation. Individuation is the lifelong process of becoming who we truly are, not just who we appear to be on the outside, but who we are at the deepest level. This journey isn't straightforward. It involves confronting hidden fears, healing old wounds, and integrating parts of ourselves we might have rejected. And throughout this process, the symbolic mind is our guide. It speaks to us through dreams, intuitions, emotional reactions, and even strange coincidences, what Jung called synchronicities. For instance, let's say you keep seeing images of fire in dreams, books, or movies. Fire could be a symbol of transformation, anger, passion, or even destruction. Your symbolic mind might be trying to show you that a part of your life needs to change, or that a powerful emotion is trying to rise to the surface. If you ignore these signs, they might come out in unhealthy ways, like anxiety, burnout, or self-sabotage. But if you pay attention, you might begin to understand what your unconscious is telling you. In this way, symbols act like inner messengers, helping us make sense of what we can't say in plain language. Jung also taught that symbols don't have just one meaning. Their power lies in their ability to hold many meanings at once. A mountain might symbolize challenge, peace, isolation, or spiritual growth, depending on the person and the context. This richness allows the symbolic mind to speak to each person differently, offering exactly the message they need. It's a more flexible and creative form of knowing than logic alone. In daily life, the symbolic mind helps us move beyond black and white thinking. It encourages us to see life as layered, complex, and meaningful. It invites us to ask not just what is happening, but what does this mean to me? Through this lens, even ordinary events can carry deep personal significance. A broken mirror, a song that makes you cry, or a bird appearing at just the right moment. These can all become part of a symbolic language guiding your growth. Carl Jung didn't want us to abandon reason. He believed in science, medicine, and clear thinking. But he also knew that the soul speaks a different language, one of images, stories, and deep inner knowing. By reawakening the symbolic mind, we begin to live in a world that is not just seen, but also felt. A world that is not just explained, but also understood. And perhaps most importantly, a world that mirrors the deepest parts of who we are. At the heart of Carl Jung's theory of human behavior is the idea of archetypes, deep, universal patterns or images that live in the unconscious mind of every human being. Jung didn't invent these archetypes, he discovered them. He saw them repeating across time, culture, and history, in myths, religions, dreams, and even in the stories we tell today. Archetypes, according to Jung, are not just ideas. They are living forces within us that shape how we think, feel, and behave. So what exactly is an archetype? Think of it as a blueprint of behavior or a pattern of experience. It's not a fixed image, but a form or symbol that expresses a deep psychological truth. For example, the mother archetype can appear in many ways: a nurturing woman, the earth itself, or even a fierce protector. But the emotional core is always the same: care, creation, and connection. The hero archetype appears as someone who faces challenges, overcomes fear, and brings something valuable back to the world. We see heroes in mythology like Hercules or modern stories like Harry Potter. The reason we relate to these stories so strongly is that they are not just outside us. They are within us. Jung believed that these archetypes come from what he called the collective unconscious, a vast shared part of the human mind that connects all people across time and culture. Unlike the personal unconscious, which is shaped by our individual life experiences, the collective unconscious is inherited. We are born with it. Just like all humans are born with the ability to speak a language, Jung believed we are born with the potential to understand archetypal symbols. That's why people from completely different backgrounds can be moved by the same stories or dreams. They tap into something ancient and shared. Understanding archetypes is important because they are constantly influencing our lives, whether we're aware of it or not. For instance, if you've ever felt torn between doing what society expects of you and following your own path, you've felt the tension between the persona and the true self. The persona is another archetype. It represents the mask we wear in public, the role we play to be accepted. But this mask can become too tight. We might start to confuse who we really are with the image we present. That's where other archetypes like the shadow come in to challenge us and push us toward growth. One of the most powerful aspects of Jung's idea of archetypes is that they are dynamic. We don't just carry one archetype. We move through many of them during different phases of life. As children, we often live through the archetype of the innocent. seeing the world with curiosity and wonder. During adolescence or major life transitions, the rebel or seeker archetypes may take over, leading us to question everything and look for deeper truth. As we mature, we might move into the sage, the lover, the caregiver, or even the magician, each one offering a different lesson about life. These archetypes also show up in our dreams. Jung believed that by analyzing the characters and emotions in our dreams, we could discover which archetypes are currently active within us. For example, dreaming of a wise old man might mean that the sage archetype is emerging in your life, offering guidance or inviting you to think more deeply. A recurring dream about being chased might point to a shadow aspect of yourself that you're avoiding, something about your personality or past that needs attention. By learning to recognize these archetypes, we gain a powerful tool for self-awareness. Instead of being confused by our emotions or stuck in unhealthy patterns, we can step back and ask, which archetype is playing out in me right now? What story am I unconsciously living? This helps us understand not just our behavior, but our purpose. Jung believed that when we work with archetypes consciously, they become allies. They help us evolve, heal, and move toward wholeness. In the end, archetypes aren't just abstract theories. They are the emotional and symbolic language of the human soul. They guide our relationships, shape our fears, inspire our dreams, and reveal our deepest truths. Whether we know it or not, we are always living out a story, one that's ancient, universal, and deeply personal. Jung's gift was showing us how to recognize that story and take an active role in shaping it. Because when we understand the archetypes within us, we begin to understand ourselves and humanity on a much deeper level. Carl Jung believed that every human being has two powerful psychological forces shaping their behavior, the persona and the shadow. These two concepts are deeply symbolic, and understanding them is essential if we want to truly know ourselves. The persona is the mask we wear in society, the version of ourselves we present to the world. The shadow, on the other hand, is everything we hide, our fears, impulses, desires, and even strengths that we've pushed into the unconscious. Jung taught that much of our inner conflict and suffering comes from not recognizing the dance between these two forces. Let's start with the persona. From a young age, we learn how to behave in ways that win approval and love. We figure out which parts of ourselves are acceptable and which ones aren't. Over time, we build a kind of mask that helps us survive and succeed in the world. This mask isn't fake, it's part of us, but it's not the whole picture. For example, a person might wear the persona of the responsible one, always calm, helpful, and in control, but inside they might feel anxious, angry, or vulnerable. Those hidden parts don't disappear, they simply go underground, into the shadow. The shadow is not evil, but it is powerful. It includes everything we deny, reject, or avoid in ourselves. This could be things like jealousy, selfishness, rage, or shame. But surprisingly, it can also include our creativity, confidence, and passion, especially if those qualities were discouraged in childhood. The more we try to ignore or suppress our shadow, the more it controls us from behind the scenes. Jung famously said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." In other words, if we don't face our shadow, we'll keep repeating harmful patterns without knowing why. One of the most common ways the shadow shows up is through projection. When we see something in someone else that triggers a strong emotional reaction, whether it's anger, admiration, or disgust, we are often seeing a reflection of our own hidden self. For example, a person who feels irritated by someone's confidence might be struggling with their own suppressed desire to be bold, or someone who's constantly criticizing others for being lazy may be denying their own need for rest. Jung believed that by noticing our projections, we can begin to uncover the parts of ourselves we've disowned. The journey of growth, according to Jung, requires that we confront and integrate the shadow. This doesn't mean acting out our worst impulses, it means recognizing them, accepting that they exist, and understanding what they're trying to tell us. Often, the shadow holds deep emotional wounds or unmet needs. When we listen to it without judgment, we begin to heal. And as we integrate the shadow, we also reclaim the energy we've used to keep it hidden. We become more whole, authentic, and alive. But facing the shadow is not easy. It requires honesty, courage, and a willingness to feel uncomfortable. That's why Jung placed such importance on symbols, dreams, and myths. They can show us the shadow in a way that's indirect, gentle, and powerful. A nightmare, for example, might reveal a part of the shadow that's trying to be acknowledged. A dream about falling, being chased, or encountering a dark figure isn't just random. It's the unconscious mind inviting us to look deeper. At the same time, we must also be aware of the limits of the persona. While it helps us function in society, it can become a prison if we identify with it too strongly. People who live only through their persona often feel hollow or fake. They might look successful on the outside, but feel lost or anxious inside. Jung warned that too much identification with the persona cuts us off from the richness of the inner world. True self-knowledge comes when we balance our outer mask with inner truth. Ultimately, Jung saw the integration of the persona and the shadow as a sacred task. It's not about becoming perfect, it's about becoming whole. When we stop pretending to be someone we're not and stop hiding from who we are, we create space for real transformation. We develop compassion for ourselves and others. We stop reacting blindly and start choosing consciously. This is the essence of what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming our true, complete self. In the symbolic mind, the shadow and the persona are not enemies. They are two sides of the same coin. One faces the world, the other faces the soul. When we learn to honor both, we step into a fuller version of ourselves, and we begin to live not from fear or image, but from depth, truth, and meaning. Carl Jung believed that the human psyche speaks a language far older than words, a language made of images, symbols, and patterns that appear in our dreams, and the myths we pass down through generations. To Jung, both dreams and myths were not meaningless fantasies, but messages from the deepest part of the unconscious. They were bridges between our conscious selves and the hidden truths of the soul. Let's start with dreams. For many people, dreams feel random or strange, but Jung saw them as essential. He believed that dreams were the psyche's way of trying to balance itself. They show us what we're ignoring, hiding, or failing to understand. For example, if you're overly focused on logic in your waking life, your dreams might flood with emotion or chaotic imagery, not to confuse you, but to restore inner harmony. Jung called this the compensatory function of dreams. Dreams don't just mirror our lives, they complete them. Jung didn't analyze dreams with fixed meanings like, if you dream of flying, it means freedom. Instead, he looked at symbols in context. He believed each dream symbol is deeply personal, but also taps into universal patterns from the collective unconscious. That's where archetypes come in again. Figures like the wise old man, the nurturing mother, the hero, or the shadowy enemy. These archetypes appear not only in our dreams, but in myths across all cultures. And that's no coincidence. Jung believed that just as we inherit a body shaped by evolution, we also inherit a mind shaped by psychological evolution. This brings us to myths. Jung saw myths not as outdated stories, but as expressions of the human soul. They are psychological blueprints that reflect humanity's deepest struggles, fears, and hopes. Why do so many ancient stories include a hero going on a dangerous journey, facing monsters and returning home transformed? Because that's our story. It reflects the path of individuation, the inner journey of becoming whole. Myths help us make sense of life's transitions: birth, growth, crisis, death, and rebirth. They show us that we're not alone in our struggles. We're part of something much bigger. The connection between dreams and myths lies in symbolism. A dream is your personal myth. It speaks in the same symbolic language that myths use, but it's tailored to your specific life. If you dream of being lost in a forest, that symbol might reflect a feeling of confusion or the need to reconnect with something primal. In myths, forests often represent the unknown or the unconscious. Jung encouraged people to record and reflect on their dreams, not to interpret them literally, but to explore what feelings, situations, or memories they might be pointing toward. Jung also emphasized that these symbols evolve as we grow. A symbol that means one thing in childhood can take on new meaning in adulthood. This is because symbols are alive. They shift, deepen, and reveal more over time. That's why ancient myths still speak to us today. They're not frozen in the past. They're eternal patterns playing out again and again in each of our lives. One of Jung's greatest insights was that the unconscious doesn't just contain repressed material. It also contains guidance, wisdom, and potential. In our dreams and the stories we're drawn to, we can find answers to questions we didn't even know we were asking. This is especially true during times of transition or crisis. When the conscious mind is overwhelmed, the unconscious often steps in with symbols that can guide us forward, if we learn how to listen. But this listening takes patience. The symbolic mind doesn't speak in plain language. It shows us truths sideways through metaphor and image. Jung believed that working with this inner language required both intuition and reflection. It's not about decoding dreams like a puzzle. It's about developing a relationship with your inner world. Over time, you begin to sense what certain symbols mean for you, how they're tied to your emotions, your fears, and your purpose. In many ways, Jung viewed life itself as a kind of myth, each person living out their own symbolic journey. By paying attention to dreams and myths, we begin to see the deeper meaning behind our experiences. A failure might no longer feel like the end, but like a necessary descent before transformation. A conflict might reveal an internal battle between different parts of the self. Suddenly, ordinary life becomes rich with symbolic meaning, and even suffering becomes part of a greater unfolding. In Jung's vision, the soul is always speaking. It speaks in dreams. It speaks through the myths we resonate with, and it speaks through the symbols that quietly shape our lives. To decode this language is not just a psychological practice. It's a spiritual act. It's how we reconnect with who we are beneath the surface. It's how we begin to live, not just react. And in doing so, we come to realize that meaning is not something we have to find. It's something we are always. Carl Jung believed that the ultimate goal of human life is not happiness, success, or even comfort, but wholeness. He called this deep psychological and spiritual journey individuation. To individuate means to become who you truly are, not who society wants you to be, not who your parents expected you to be, not even who you think you should be, but your full, authentic self, including your conscious identity and your unconscious depths. It's not a path for the faint of heart, but it is the path that brings true meaning to life. At first glance, individuation might sound like becoming more individual, more separate from others, but Jung meant something much deeper. Individuation is not about isolation, it's about integration. It's the process of weaving together all the parts of your personality, the light and the dark, the strengths and weaknesses, the masculine and feminine, the rational and the emotional. All of it matters. Jung saw the human psyche as a vast inner universe, filled with symbols, archetypes, and untapped potential. But most people only live in a small corner of their mind, cut off from their own depths. Individuation is about turning inward, exploring that inner world, and slowly discovering who you were always meant to be. The journey of individuation begins with the realization that the life we've built, our roles, routines, even beliefs, might not reflect our true self. This realization often comes through a crisis, depression, loss, confusion, or a deep sense of emptiness. Jung called this the call to adventure, similar to what we see in myths and stories. Something breaks down, forcing us to look within. And what we find there is not always easy. We come face to face with our shadow, the parts of ourselves we've denied, repressed, or judged. This confrontation is painful, but it is necessary. Until we meet our shadow, we can't move forward. Along the way, we also encounter the persona, the mask we wear in public. Individuation requires that we question this mask. Are we living a life that reflects who we truly are, or are we just performing a role to fit in? As we let go of the need to constantly please others, we begin to act from a deeper place. We also begin to discover hidden strengths, qualities we never knew we had because they were buried under fear, shame, or conditioning. In this way, individuation is not about becoming someone else. It's about remembering who you've always been. Dreams play a vital role in individuation. Jung believed that dreams are the voice of the unconscious, offering symbols and messages that guide us on the journey. For example, dreaming of a house with many hidden rooms might suggest unexplored parts of your personality. A recurring dream about being lost might point to the need for inner direction. By paying attention to these symbolic messages, we start to understand ourselves on a deeper level. Life becomes less about control and more about dialogue, with the soul, with the unconscious, with the symbolic world. Another key part of individuation is encountering archetypes, those universal patterns like the hero, the sage, the lover, the shadow. As we grow, we move through different archetypal stages, each teaching us something new. We may begin as the innocent, become the seeker, face trials as the hero, and return transformed. These are not just stories, they are psychological blueprints for our own development. The more we recognize them within ourselves, the more consciously we can live out their lessons. Individuation also involves embracing paradox. Jung believed the true self holds opposites together, joy and sorrow, strength and vulnerability, clarity and confusion. In a world that often pushes us to pick sides, individuation teaches us to accept complexity. You can be both powerful and scared, both logical and intuitive, both disciplined and creative. Real growth happens when we stop fighting these inner tensions and start holding space for them. Importantly, individuation is not a straight line or a checklist. It's a spiral, a journey we return to again and again. There's no final destination, only deeper levels of self-awareness. Some people individuate through therapy, others through art, nature, spirituality, or deep reflection. But however it unfolds, individuation always leads to a more honest relationship with the self and with the world. Jung believed that when individuals begin to individuate, society also transforms. A person who knows themselves deeply is less likely to be controlled by fear, hatred, or blind obedience. They live from the inside out, not the outside in. They act with compassion, wisdom, and clarity. In a time when the world often feels fragmented and shallow, Jung's message is revolutionary. The way to heal the world is to first become whole within yourself. Individuation is the soul's quiet revolution. It is not easy, not quick, and never finished, but it is the most meaningful journey you will ever take.